Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another DSLR video shooter live stream. Thank you so much for joining me. We have a bunch of people already in the chat. 360 grad, Daniel Moore, what's going on? One of our members. We got Daniel again, Gabriel, Bill, Mr. Nobody. Wow, you guys have been chatting a lot already. Donnie Rosie, Jared, Leo, Black Warrior Lures, and others. Welcome everybody. I'm very excited for this particular stream because we have our first guest that I think we've ever had, which is amazing. This is a very good friend of mine, and his name is Jem Schofield. We're going to go ahead and pull that up right now. There's the man himself. What's up, Jem?
What's up, Caleb?
Thanks so much for joining me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too.
This is one of my besties when it comes to video production. It's hard to hang up on him when we're on the phone. We just talk forever. So yeah, Jem Schofield runs the theC47, tons of educational material. You've been doing this forever. Lots of events. He's done work for Zeiss, work for Canon, and many, many more that I'm sure I'm forgetting. And you definitely should check out his channel. Link is in the description for two reasons. One, he's awesome and he's got tons of great content already there and coming up, so make sure you're subbed over there. And two, right after this live stream, we're going to be doing a show together, one that we've been working on forever and will be a regular show, and it's called Camera and Flask. It's essentially myself, yes, there he is, with he's already ready. You're all set, dude.
Let's go.
Jem Schofield, myself, and our good friend Ben Barden. We'll be having a weekly show over there talking about news in the filmmaking and photography industry. We'll be sharing little tips. We'll be sharing a beverage each week that we are consuming during the show, amongst other things. So I'm wicked excited for that. So if you want to continue the show and the party, I will drop, it's actually in the description right now. I will also grab a link here in a second and put it in the chat, all right? So please do me a favor, do Jem a favor, and let's all head over there and keep this train a-rolling after this stream. So, Jem, do you want to real quick run through just what's up with you for those who unfortunately haven't heard of the beautiful thing that is Jem Schofield?
Oh, for goodness sake. I just do want to first of all acknowledge Black Warrior Lures and say John Schofield is a great guitar player. So, and I am not that same person, but that's okay. And yes, I will very quickly, I guess, and then we just start to get into geek speak, tell you a tiny bit about myself. I'm a producer, a DP or DOP, depending on where you're watching this from, and also an educator. I spend about 20 to 30% of my time on education, and the rest of the time is just churning out production for a variety of clients. I started doing this video on the web thing way back started in 2008. And then in 2009, I did daily video podcasts, if you could call them those back then. And that's sort of where we met, Caleb, back in those days. And I was doing a show called Gearbox, where 5 days a week I was just posting stuff about what I was interested in. And just recently, about 2 months ago, I rebooted that as Gearbox 2.0 on my YouTube channel. And I do a lot of production, and I do a fair amount of education. And I just like to teach people about the craft of video production and filmmaking. And I don't know, I've helped design some products too, like the theC47 DP kit and the theC47 Booklight kit for Westcott. So there you go. And James is asking already, what's my lighting setup? So do I answer that, Caleb? Am I allowed to?
Yeah. Do it. Let's go over our setups.
Yeah. So, and personal view, am I trying a new marketing approach? No, I'm just trying an actual marketing approach. If that's a good answer for that. So if you could see what's going on here, it's a big favorite of mine. I'm basically side keying, and I'm side filling over here. I have a 1x1 being pushed through about a 4x4 silk. That's this right here. And then I have just sort of like a little reflector over on this side, which is grabbing the light. A little kicker edgy thing, not doing a lot right now, but it's there, which is a little Felix light. And there's a background light over there, which is set to a different color temperature. I'm actually set to tungsten all around, and then I'm piped in through this cam link thing that Caleb told me to get, and I'm pushing a C300, C200 actually today through that, though I do a lot of stuff with the C300 Mark II. And that's it. I guess that's my lighting setup for today, and it works. What do you think?
Works great.
There
Yeah,
we go.
no, I think it's great. Mine's this beauty lighting-ish bounce mess that I had to throw together for
You're
today.
you're coming in more from camera side, basically, right?
Right above the camera, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That way
Okay,
I
good.
can move around. It's not an issue, but it's a little much, a little flat. Right, so let's jump into today's topic. Obviously, things are picking up a lot in the video market as a whole, but also this kind of smaller camera. We're going to be talking more about the whole full frame madness in our next stream over on Jem's channel. Again, I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. There it is in the live stream chat, so make sure you're over there after the stream. And we're going to be talking about kind of the future of camera tech, right? So we're starting to see some things happen. 10-bit, surprisingly to me, is kind of becoming a thing on these smaller cameras. So I guess the first question is, where do you kind of see us tiptoeing into some new territory right now when it comes to these cameras, sensors, what manufacturers are doing? And then we'll jump into what's next after everyone calms down with the whole full frame situation.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, I mean, you and I have had lots of conversations about this, Caleb, and the writing is pretty much on the wall in terms of where we're going in terms of smaller format cameras, obviously mirrorless. Kind of funny because in the digital cinema world, pretty much every camera that we use is a mirrorless camera. You know, it doesn't have a mirror in it, and it's not an SLR or a digital SLR equivalent. But that name, mirrorless, has been attached to smaller format cameras, which are essentially starting to replace the DSLR cameras that are on the market. And there's a number of things that are going on. I mean, obviously, and again, we're going to talk about it on Camera and Flask, is sensor size and the fact that full frame is now becoming pretty standardized with all of these recent announcements with the different companies that are coming into this space, including, though, with the fixed lens Zeiss. So that was kind of a surprise overall.
Yes.
And wasn't it? I was kind of surprised about that one.
Very, very, very interesting form factor too.
Yeah, and sort of the approach, and I can't imagine that they're putting all that R&D into that camera, and that they won't come out with other cameras, you know, and that they won't. I'm imagining they won't all be fixed lens cameras, but we'll have to see where that all goes. So I think that that's part of it, but then we're also seeing even larger sensors that are coming in under the $5,000 US price point. So we're seeing medium format now, especially with Fujifilm coming into the space. And there's no question that the smaller format cameras are a big part of what we're doing with production. And as we start to put 10-bit into those cameras, either internally or externally, and we start to see some of the other features trickling down from the digital cinema cameras, they'll become even more valuable and more part of what we use in our day-to-day production, in my opinion, because there's a huge advantage to having small format cameras that go beyond just their physical size, you know, in terms of being able to shoot in a lot of different places where you can't get big cameras into those spaces, I guess.
So
Yeah.
follow-up questions. Two things that are kind of interesting to see how they'll play out over time. You mentioned the Fuji coming out with a very affordable medium format, digital medium format camera, which is not common. Do you think, you know, are we going to keep going bigger and bigger with our sensors? Because right now we're in this middle of this full frame. A couple people have mentioned they think full frame is overrated.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's the end all sensor size by any means.
Sure.
But with this, are we going to see a medium format craze? And then how does that play into the small bodies? Because with medium format, we're going to have bigger bodies, bigger sensors, bigger lenses. Now that we've kind of reached this if this trend keeps going, we've reached this pinnacle of small form factor, or we
Yep.
gonna start seeing stuff blow up again in size.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have at least my current position on that, which is that medium format has always been something that was reserved for still photographers. It got to the point in the digital world with digital backs where it became virtually unaffordable for anybody but the highest end still photographers to be in that kind of workflow. So in the 35 millimeter, digital world, the big boon was when we started to get to these much higher megapixels, and that allowed still photographers to do print work and blow those images up without necessarily having to go to medium format. And that's one of the reasons that lenses like the Otis lenses were designed by Zeiss, because they wanted to make sure that they were matching that glass with those higher megapixel cameras so that still photographers could still get amazing images, but at a much more affordable price than they were for some of those phase one digital backs and the Hasselblad workflows and things like that. So I still think that might be true, though it's now becoming a lot more affordable for a still photographer to go into medium format, and it might be something that sort of differentiates them a little bit from the 35 millimeter full frame people out there. And it's pretty amazing if you've seen the size or lack thereof of the new Fujifilm 50 series camera, how small that is for a medium format. But of course, when you go to medium format, you have a much bigger sensor plane, and you are talking about a whole new lens system, which of course is what we're also dealing with the mirrorless conversion from Nikon or Nikon, depending on where you are, and Canon. So there's so many freaking things going on right now. It's kind of mind-blowing. And sensor size is one of them, resolution is one of them, and then of course what you brought up, which is bit depth, and then chroma sampling is the other. And when do they matter and when do they not? And I think that's kind of where I'm sitting on that. Does that make sense? Kind of.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, it's going
How
to
about
be
you?
pretty.
Yeah. What do you
I don't
think?
know. It's I think the medium format thing is going to take a while to kick up. It's just kind of interesting with Fuji because they don't have a full frame, so that's their two sensor sizes, right? Super 35 or APS-C, and that medium format.
Yep.
I think it'd be I feel like starting now for the next who knows how long, maybe a decade or longer, our lives are going to be ruled by like adapters.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so much good glass right now, but we have how many new
Am I allowed to
mounts?
curse? Am I allowed to curse on your show? I'm not going
Yeah.
to. No, I'm not going to. It's okay. Between the adapters that we have to use on camera systems and the dongles that we have to use on
Oh
our
my
computers now,
And
it's
phones.
just. I mean, this stupid thing here has a couple of hard drives in it, but it's basically a bag of dongles. That doesn't sound right. Maybe that's about as far as I can go. It's ridiculous how many things we have to attach to make things work. And thank you, Apple, for taking the whole concept of simplicity and making it complicated by making it simple. I don't. Okay, well,
No, I think Apple maybe jumped the gun a little. Well, they always do this, right? But I think someday everything's going to have end and terminate in a USB-C.
yes,
someday.
and then they'll decide on the new connector, and that's
Yeah,
the way
exactly.
it goes. So there you go. Everybody will catch up.
I think
Yeah.
the quick rabbit hole for just a second. I think the ultimate connector. I can't remember who I was talking to about this. The
Yeah.
ultimate connector style, maybe not the speeds and specs, is Lightning connector. The Lightning one for charging
Yes.
your iOS devices.
Yes, it is.
Because it's like hard to break. It's
Yep.
flat.
Yep.
Doesn't matter which side it goes in, and when you connect it, it kind of pops and locks enough.
Yep.
It's not like you're having to unscrew something, but I think that's the ultimate, and it's smaller. So someday we'll get there.
How did
But,
you fit popping and locking into a Lightning connector? That was a little bit of an 80s, whatever. Okay, there you go. You know about popping and locking?
I do not.
Oh,
Is this
well,
a
you just
song or
said
is this
it.
a music video or is
No,
this?
pop. Okay, so there's going to be some people here who popping and locking, like in the hip hop culture. It's part of,
Oh,
the
I've
whole
heard that in a
breakdancing,
song. Poppin'
popping and
and lock
locking.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
poppin' and
Okay,
locking. Yep.
popping and
Okay.
locking.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. There it
All
is.
right. There you go. So that's the first time in this episode that I'm going to show my age.
There you go.
Yeah,
So right
good.
now we're dealing with a whole big old bag of dongles. That's kind of our life right now. That's
Yeah.
what we're saying.
Yes,
Yeah, lens
exactly.
mounts. That's where we started with all this.
Oh, wait,
Lens
and by the
mounts.
way, last thing on the medium format thing. Medium format is going to be basically for us, potentially, it's like IMAX in your pocket, right? Because we talk about that film size or that sensor size, and that's where we're going to be able to shoot like IMAX in your pocket or your backpack. So that's
That's
crazy.
true.
Yeah,
Now,
there you go.
what is IMAX like? It's 65 millimeter film, right?
Right.
How does
And
that translate to medium format? Because I
that's a
don't
good
know. I don't know
question.
anything. I don't know
I know,
dongle about all that.
I know everything below. Well, not everything. I know a lot below that, but I don't know the equivalent. And maybe somebody can chime in. Get on the Googles, everybody, or go to Reddit and type in what the equivalent size is for medium format, which of course has variables because in the stills world, medium format generally based on 120 film, but it depended on aspect ratio because you could
Mm.
have different aspect ratios. So that's part of it as well. But I think that's about as close as we're going to be able to get to, 65 millimeter, 70 millimeter. That medium format, I think, is getting close to that. So
Yeah, I'm sure
I'm
Fur
looking
will
here.
do it. Fur is a beast. He's one of the members, and he's an animal.
Okay, so
Usually
Furworks
has on.
is get on it,
Yeah, Fur
Furworks.
works.
Let's go. I'm
Not to give
waiting.
you not to put you any pressure on your Fur, but I believe in you. Um, yeah, interesting, very interesting. And then the lenses for that, there is some pretty interesting old stuff, but again, I feel like there's a bunch of formats there.
Yeah,
Like I have
yeah.
a couple Carl Zeiss Jena lenses that are medium format, Pentacon 6, I think, or something like that. So there's some interesting stuff there, kind of a new world. But yeah, the lens mount situation is ridiculous. It was so simple for so long. Canon and Nikon, and
Yep.
then Sony for a while. The Sony E mount, and still obviously.
Hey,
And
wait.
adapting was very
I was doing
straightforward.
Olympus. I was doing Olympus. I have a whole bunch of Zuiko lenses
Oh
too.
right,
But
yep,
yeah, but still, it was very simple.
right. From like a digital, DSLR kind of situation, and
Yep.
going into the beginnings of mirrorless.
Yep.
Um, Yeah, so Fur is saying, I don't think there's a size for medium format because it's treated at everything larger than 35 millimeter within reason below LF, large format.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Yeah.
So part-time films says his new favorite insult is "You were dumber than a bag of dongles."
I like this dongles thing.
It's we're
Eat a,
getting we're
eat a
getting
bag of dongles.
and the poppin' and lockin's getting some life too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
And then
true.
Crilly in here with his support. Appreciate you.
Yeah, but
Um,
Furworks, you got to get on it. What we're saying is we want to know. Let's just take the Fujifilm or something like that, or the digital equivalent of the Pentax 645, and that particular size. How does that equate to IMAX 65 millimeter? And see if you
uh,
can find
uh,
out how close we are. Yeah.
Black Warrior just said IMAX film frame is 87.91 millimeter diagonal.
Dang, that's IMAX. Okay. But
IMAX,
then,
okay.
but then, what is medium format? If we do like a 645.
Medium format is 6.7.
Okay,
So we've got
so
a
it's
ways to
still,
go.
but it's still
In
pretty
between Z.
ginormous.
It's the APS-C of medium formats.
It's the APS-C of yeah, exactly. We could call the IMAX the full frame, and we call this other one what do we call it? APS-C
APS-C
Z's
medium.
APS-C
Medium
Z's.
APS-C. I don't know. And
That's
for
great.
those who have just joined us, I apologize. We're all over the place at this
Yeah,
point.
you don't know
Uh,
dongle. Okay, let's get focused again. That's
okay.
somebody else said that.
So
Okay, good.
mounts are crazy right now. So looking
Yep.
forward, let's break it down into categories, right? So
Yep.
let's start with image. So we talked about full frame. We talked a little bit about going forward. We might see some interesting medium format options. So sensor sizes, image, which brings us to 10-bit, 12-bit. We're starting to see 10-bit show up. Do you have any thoughts on what might be the next big thing and when you think we'll start to see it?
Right.
So categories are bit
Yep.
rate,
Yep.
chroma keying, 422,
Chroma sampling. Yeah.
444,
Yeah.
chroma sampling.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why I have Jem on. And then data rates,
Yeah.
dynamic range, raw,
Yep.
all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that happening already in smaller cameras, but not necessarily with the bigger sensors. So it seems like up until recently, and even the new full frame cameras are generally dealing with 10-bit externally, not internally. There's probably some correlation between sensor size, size of camera body, heat produced, and what can be done, because the processors are obviously part of it. The crippling of camera features, which does happen, of course, by manufacturers, is part of it, to protect higher end of the market. But the reality is that we're not seeing lots of super 35 millimeter and larger sensor cameras in that small form factor with raw, high data rates, that chroma sampling, at least 422 and 10-bit. So I think, there's a holy grail, which is shooting in some sort of compressed raw format that's as easy to work with as a compressed format. So we're seeing that now in two flavors in the market. One is Black Magic RAW, and we'll see where that goes. And then the other one is, of course, ProRes RAW. And that's the holy grail, because if you can capture to those compressed formats, the data rates are already high. You're generally 12-bit. You're going to convert it to a video signal, and then in log, it's going to give you the most dynamic range you're getting out of the sensor. So I think that's where we go holy grail, right? In terms of being able to record internally to these small format cameras. And then you have to start thinking about, in addition to that, what are the things that we're looking for, which have been solved by a couple of camera companies very elegantly. One is audio inputs, and so Sony and Panasonic have done a great job of that. Sony probably the most mature of all the companies with their adapters and their multi-function shoe and being able to put a dual channel receiver into an A7 series camera, and then have two wireless transmitters feeding to that, and that's all going into the camera wirelessly. But they and also Panasonic have that also very elegant solution, which just sits on top of the camera with two XLR inputs. We got away from the YAG thing, and now it's pretty straightforward. So the first one, I think,
that thing was terrible.
The worst
so
piece
bad.
That was like the dog poo of the universe.
Make your camera 3 times the size. Oh, and you still have to throw a V mount on there somehow.
Do you get demonetized for saying dog poo, or that's okay? That's like dongle, basically, right?
No,
that's okay.
Good.
Okay, good. And then I'm just checking. I don't know, and then the second part of that equation is, in my mind, if you have holy grail of we've got everything in terms of image being captured to the camera, is ND. And I think that that's really the thing that we fight with. Once you've used a digital cinema camera that has at least 6 stops of ND, and some of the new cameras have 7 or go all the way up to 10 stops of ND, the speed at which you can work going inside to outside, it just becomes part of your production workflow. And then when you have to step back into fixed NDs or to a very ND and think about things, it slows things down considerably. You're worried about whether or not there's dust or dirt or finger marks or smudges on your lenses. And so it just brings up a whole other component to production. And so I think that that's also something that when you're using these smaller cameras that has to be considered. But I'm pretty confident that, within a couple of years, because of the very ND system that Sony has, that we'll start to see some things like that. And the Canon EOS R system, with the adapters, funnily enough, not with the native glass, has an ND system, though it's not a variable. And I don't think it's electronic, is it, Caleb? the one for the EOS R system,
No. Yeah, it's just a fader, essentially variable.
but built into the adapter, which we've also seen in the past. I mean, you've had a piece of kit for your setup for a long time that has essentially a variable ND built into the back of the adapter, right?
Yeah, I've mentioned it. It's pretty rough though. What's
Yeah.
exciting is this Canon one is from what I saw, and I have some footage I haven't fully delved into, but it's pretty nice. And what's cool is I wonder if they could pretty easily, I think, make an adapter exact same form factor as the one that they've released, the variable ND one,
Mm,
and then just send electronics through it or power to it.
right.
Because if they have, because that's what's really interesting. No one knows what that mount is doing, right?
Right.
We know it's controlling the lens, but who knows how much voltage they're outputting or are able to output on that new mount because they haven't opened it up.
Yeah.
So maybe a couple of those pins, when they're combined, give you a pretty hefty amount of power. So they could do all kinds of stuff. They could, maybe come out with like, it'd be crazy if they did cinema lenses that could do dual pixel.
Yep.
You flip a switch and like a different motor takes over or something.
Yep.
And then there's some serious horsepower coming from the camera body. So yeah, they could easily just that little tray, just replace it with a something that communicates with the mount.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about looking at what's on the market and is coming to market in the near future and saying, what can we see happening in terms of the evolution of this form factor in the next year or two? And
Yeah,
I think those are the things that we're looking at overall in terms of a camera system. So I'm excited about it. I think, I'm really excited that we're not in a situation where we are being hindered in any way by by these smaller cameras, except for probably the data rates and the bit depth are the things that are probably, and of course chroma sampling. But
yeah.
they're very capable cameras overall, and I think the next thing is going to be, when are we going to start to see 10-bit internal with super 35 millimeter and full frame sensors?
Mm,
And maybe that's what the unicorn that is the A7S Mark III will be. And maybe it won't, because there are huge challenges to dealing with everything in that small camera body that I don't think they're limiting some of these cameras to 15 to 30 minutes just because.
yeah,
I think that a lot of that is because it produces a lot of heat, and that's been a big problem since the Canon, the
right.
7D, series, and that was a big problem. So I think it's interesting to see. I mean, what about
That's
you? Yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was
Sorry.
just gonna say that's interesting that they've always like blamed that one European law,
Yeah,
but it'd be funny if they don't do anything after the because the law's coming to an end or something.
yeah,
So like they'll be able to have unlimited record time.
yeah.
Um,
Panasonic just pays. Is that right? Do they just take the
yeah, they
hit?
just they just
They just take
say
the
we're the
hit.
best and they just do it.
and
Yeah.
and they classify it as a video camera,
Yep.
basically, and that's what they do. So, but again, they're still micro four thirds until they're full
Ish.
frame cameras. Yeah, ish.
Yeah.
Well,
With
yeah,
the
yeah,
S,
yeah. With the S,
getting a little
different.
funny with that.
And then you start to get into speed boosters and things like that, and then angle of view starts to change, and you gain a stop and all that fun stuff.
Right.
So at the moment, Panasonic, aside from the autofocus capabilities, which companies are now starting to catch up with. I mean, the A7 III is a great example. It's been Canon's game forever and ever. Um, Clearly, Sony has figured stuff out, right? I mean, that A7 III has got a heck of a autofocus system.
Yep. Yeah. It's what's I'm going to be doing. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but life got in the way. So what me and another colleague are going to be doing out here is comparing the EOS R, A7 III, GH5, GH5S, Fuji X-T3,
Yep.
and I might be able to get my hands on an Nikon Z7 and then throw them all together. And I think, because all people have done with the A7 III is praise it. But I'm finding there's a couple scenarios where it just struggles. And we talked on the phone trying to figure out if it's 10-bit or if it's the data rate. Or a lack of 10-bit, I should say.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to figuring that out because I don't know. But I have noticed that in my studio, if you guys watch some of my videos, you'll notice I have my key light and then I have a background light. And they're two slightly different LED colors, hues. And they hit this white board in the background. And where they meet, funky dongles stuff starts going down over in that corner. So I don't have that problem at all on my GH5 or GH5S. It's only on my A7 III. So, and as much as people trash that EOS R, a buddy of mine who's a Red user is seriously considering that over the GH5S or the any of the other options because of the data rate. You know, guys who care about that, like what you can do with those pixels later, you know, that makes a huge difference. So right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Canon's on top and has been on top for a while when it comes to 4K, regardless of crop data rates, right?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, when we're talking about large sensor, I mean larger than Micro Four Thirds for sure. And you know, I think that's something that is worth spending 2 or 3 minutes discussing, which is that there's very different approaches from each of these companies in terms of what they give you and don't give you in their camera systems. And when we look at Sony as a camera company, they seemingly give you the kitchen sink, right? So they say, okay, so you can have all of our log gamma curves, and you can have all of our gamut color spaces, and you can dial those in, though we've both found that you're not necessarily getting the entire color space that you would get on something like an FS7 II when you're using an A7 III. But what they're doing is they're giving you that, but they're giving it to you at an extremely low data rate. So if you're using an A7 III and you're shooting in HD, 1920 by 1080, you can shoot in up to 50 megabits per second in terms of the data rate. And then math would say that if you were going to shoot in ultra high definition, which is 4 times HD's resolution, then you should be shooting for the same quality picture with exactly the same bit depth and the exact same color space at a minimum of 200 megabits per second, right? So you take 50 times it by 4, and then you get 200 megabits per second. But in the Sony A7 series cameras right now, internally, the highest bit rate you can, or data rate you can record to is 100 megabits per second. So it's only double the data rate of HD instead of 4 times that. And that means how much data can you actually give to that huge color space and that log gamma curve? Not a lot. You take another camera system that is essentially same equivalent color space, same equivalent gamma curve, FS7 II, good example, and you're recording it over 400 megabits per second, you can do so much more with that image, and it's also 10-bit. So you add both of those things. So it's pretty interesting. It's like the combinations are unbelievable, but if the data rate is low, your image will break regardless in post-production more quickly than if your data rate is high, because you're allocating more of those to all of that color and that dynamic range.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find a way to compare or just do it 8-bit high data rate versus 10-bit low data rate.
Yep.
Or something, because even the 150 on the GH5 is pretty solid. That's what I use for most of my YouTube videos.
And that's a long GOP, right? So that's not a intra-frame recording.
Yeah. And it's 422 10-bit, 150 megabits a second.
It's technically more efficient. The C200 internally to the SD cards, not when you're shooting raw to the CFast cards, is also 150 megabits per second.
In 4K? No, right, okay. Nice.
Internally to the SD cards, so the MP4 or the MXF things. So somebody had a question back here, which I actually thought was pretty interesting. Black Warrior Lures said, "What about 10-bit workflow though? Question mark. Monitors and all that."
Mm,
Um, that's a ooh, that's a man,
that's jumping
that's
into
a
the
rabbit
deep end,
hole.
man.
Maybe that's another episode. That is a
Could we put
great
it? Could
question.
it is a great question. Could you put it this way? Could you say that regardless of if you're using a 10-bit monitor, you'll see it, right? You'll see a difference. Just like I'm using a 4K monitor, and when people upload 1080p videos and they're like, that's all people need to see, they're not going to see the difference. I can clearly see a difference. It looks fuzzy.
Yes.
Could you say that you're still gaining a lot of information that you can work with even if you can't see it? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think to a degree. I think it's how the monitor maps the signal that's coming into it. I mean, this is a big subject because we're moving away from a Rec 709 color space world into much bigger color spaces, which you know about, Caleb, and a lot of the people here do, where we're going to be dealing with P3 and Rec 2020 color spaces in the future, which are far bigger than Rec 709. And the problem with Rec 709 as a color space or color gamut is that we couldn't physically look at something bigger than 709 in the HD world because the monitors that people were manufacturing weren't capable of showing a bigger color gamut than that. And so we have this whole broadcast safe crap, and you see these whites and these reds buzzing and going crazy if they're outside of broadcast safe. It's because the screen is not physically capable of showing you that color. So when you try to feed it that color, it just wigs out and it goes absolutely crazy. And that's part of the problem overall in terms of the displays that we have right now. The cameras are far more capable of capturing information than the monitors that we're looking at our images are capable of showing us. Most of the displays out there that cost less than $2,000 or $3,000 are actually 8-bit, and they can't show us a color space any bigger than P3. Rec 2020 is like for the $20,000 to $30,000 monitors out there. And there's a huge subject there that I think we can start to get into together, Caleb, in the future, where we can start to break this stuff down for people to understand, because the monitors are starting to catch up with what the cameras are capable of capturing. But most of our displays are still 1080. So we falsely think that things are in focus all the time when we're shooting in 4K because we're looking at it on 1080 monitors, which is the exact opposite of what you're experiencing, Caleb, when you're watching 1080 stuff on a UHD monitor, because it's basically blowing it up and it looks, mushy.
Yeah.
So there's so many things. Like, it's so much easier to get tack sharp focus in production when you're looking at a 4K monitor and you're shooting in 4K because it's pixel for pixel. And
Yep.
the only way we can actually deal with it now is by using focus assist or basically doing expanded focus, where we
Right.
only get to basically, on a 1080 display, we're basically windowing a quarter of what the total resolution is. So we can look at a 1920 by 1080 portion of the image at 1:1, but we can't look at it at 1:1 at UHD. That makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
No,
So,
that'd
yeah.
be that'd be a great something, a live stream, a video to break down, or a series of videos breaking down 10-bit chroma sampling,
Yep, yep.
data rates, just everything, log, because people have to figure this out eventually, right? Like
Yes.
someday there's going to be a bunch of vloggers trying to figure out how to do tutorial on HDR. It's not that way now. That's kind
Yep.
of a kind of a tricky one to figure out. But someday, like log, remember how suddenly log was everywhere
Yep.
and people were BSing their way through explaining what it was and why they like to shoot on it.
Yep.
No, so it's very there's going to be a lot more of that, I feel.
It's going to explode, and as people start to, I mean, that's what I'm teaching in my workshop for people who are doing, corporate and in-house production, because they have these budgets. They work for a company, and they go out and they buy, $6, $10 to $20,000 cameras, but they can shoot with the cameras, but they really don't understand what the future of delivery is going to be. The whole HDR thing and everything related to that. And the cameras are there for the most part.
Yeah.
It's just the displays and the whole workflow that has to get explained. Most of the people watching this, are used to LUT-based workflows now, and that's of course came out for us in the big way because of log and how to deal with that video signal and that dynamic range, logarithmic curve. How do we make it look, like it's going to possibly look in post and for delivery. And in the future, we're going to not just be using Rec 709 LUTs, but as the displays are capable of showing P3 and the Rec 2020 color gamuts, we're actually going to be probably cycling through, hey, what's this going to look like if somebody's looking at on a monitor that has Rec 709? And then we'll load up the P3 version of that LUT and take a look at that. And then we'll take a look at the Rec 2020 LUT. And they exist already, these LUTs. But most people aren't looking at them because most of the displays just don't support, especially Rec 2020 as a color gamut. So yeah,
it's going to be a painful transition.
Oh, it already is.
It's crazy to think like going from SD to HD, HD to 4K was just more. That's all it was, more.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas
well, for the most, except for aspect ratio, yeah. Yeah, we only have to struggle with the 4:369, but everything else is just more. Yeah. Now it's a total cluster.
More and a little different. Now it's like a lot.
And as you said before, towards the beginning, all of the adapters, all of the new, lens systems, and then trying to make a decision based on the work that you're doing, especially if you're going mirrorless, which camera system's the right camera system for what you're doing. I'm coming out with a new series with Able soon, which we haven't announced, but it relates to small digital cinema cameras. But it, the same problems in terms of deciding on which camera system you want to choose for something exist, and possibly in a more complicated or confusing way with mirrorless than they do in digital cinema cameras. Because digital cinema cameras, what do we've got?
Right.
We've got FS5 II, FS7 II. You've got the EVA 1. You've got the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K. You've got the C200, and you've got the C300 Mark II. And in terms of cameras that cost less than $10,000 US that are sort of in that package, those are the main camera systems that we're talking about. A little bit more, you start to get into Red, right? Raven and things like that.
Right. And
then we go up a little bit higher. But it's relatively easy to figure that out. And then
at that point, like, there's just basic across the board specs. Like, they all have a lot of that good stuff that on this level, the kind of cameras that we're talking about here, it's just nuts, right? It's just all over the place. It's crazy.
You try to explain to me the differences between your GH series Panasonic cameras and the difference between a GH5, GH5S, and a GH7 and a GH9, right? There's a 9.
And G9 and then
G9,
the G7.
G7. Yeah. And so there's certain things that are the same and certain things that are different, but that alone is mind-boggling just in the Panasonic bucket. And then you move over to Sony, and then you generally have, at any given time, 3 cameras in the A7 series. Then you're looking at the 6000 and 6500. Then you move to Canon, and then they've got the M series, which is kind of odd and confusing. Now you have the EOS R series, and then you have all their DSLRs, and you're trying to figure out which one might make the most sense for what you're doing. And then there's Fujifilm.
Oh gosh.
Who are coming up the rear. I mean, it's
they're probably actually the simplest out of the group, because they're just throwing everything at all their cameras now. It's ridiculous. We're almost out of time because Jem has to go set up for his stream. But I want to end with this real quick. We briefly talked about it, or you just mentioned it, the M mount from Canon. What are they going to do with that? They now have the EF. They have the RF. What are they going to get? Obviously, they just made a new lens for it, so it just doesn't make sense to me.
Here's my opinion, and it might be wrong. They never made a good lens for the M series, right? There's no great lens.
There's no the lens.
It's not like it's not like Fujifilm, and you're like, oh my God, that 56 1.2 is the bee's knees. There's nothing. So they're great little vlogging cameras, and they're okay. And then you throw a Canon, EF to M EFM adapter, I guess it is,
Yeah.
and it's it's bye bye, I think.
Yeah. You think they're just, yeah, they'll
Well, I
milk
mean,
everyone for the
I,
systems they have out now and then just bye bye.
I mean, what I really hope they do, and it would be the right thing to do, is I hope that they take that mount and they really, think about it and get a camera down, into that $1,500 price range. The real problem that they're going to run into is what are they going to do for mirrorless and APS-C? And unless they start to make really good M series lenses, people are going to buy the Fujifilm cameras without question, and they're going
Yeah.
to move into the A6000 or A7000 series cameras from Sony, and they'll of course, they'll be interested in look at the Panasonic. Though I think when it comes to full frames sitting at $2,000 and up seems to be where
Yeah.
the sweet spot is. And so what happens with the $2,000 and under, that's reserved for APS-C. And right now, like you said, I think Fujifilm is really kind of killing it in that particular market. And this is becoming potentially for them a niche that they can really take advantage of overall. They already have those MK series lenses,
Yep.
and maybe they'll get into the digital cinema camera game at a certain point as well. So I don't know. I think we'll have to see. I mean, Canon's going to have to make a big move sooner than later on those cameras if they want to keep selling mirrorless cameras that have APS-C sensors. That's my answer to that. Yeah,
No,
that's what.
that's gold. So at this point, we are going to briefly say goodbye, or Jem is. He's got to go set up for a stream that I'll be joining him on later. So
Yeah.
you want to bug out, dude? Thank you so for those who aren't going to make the next stream, which I'm sorry because that would be terribly unfortunate, and you should really try to make that stream. Really appreciate you hanging out with me over here, and we need to do this more often. We didn't
Yeah,
even
I'd
get
love
to
to.
Q&A with everybody, so maybe we can sneak that in the next stream over at your channel, maybe.
I would
See if
love
we
it.
can awesome. All right,
Yeah.
dude. I'll see you in like a couple minutes,
All right,
right?
Caleb. Yeah, I'm going to 10-1, if you know what that
Perfect.
means, and
Yes, sir.
get this all set up, and I'll send you and Ben links, and then hopefully some of you guys will come over at 6 p.m. Eastern in about 13 minutes, and we'll get going on kind of continuing this conversation, but being more focused on full frame mirrorless in
Yeah,
that one.
yeah.
All right. See you
Awesome. All
later.
right.
Thanks,
Sort your
everybody.
dongles. See you later. All right, dude. Wow. So that was super fun. Guys, I'm going to sign off here. I have to use the restroom. I'm going to drop the link to this next stream. So if you want to keep chilling for those who missed, we're starting a brand new show over at Jem's channel, theC47. So boom, just dropped it in the chat. I would love to see you guys over there. It would be great to chat. Let's do some Q&A. And I'm going to go upstairs, grab a beverage, and we're going to get this camera and flask show business underway. Thank you guys so much for joining me. We'll see you in the next video.